My first guest is public advocate Jumaane Williams, and I wanted to start out by talking to you about Rikers Island, where a federal judge this week appointed something called a remediation manager. I wonder if, after all this time and all these court hearings, if this is going to make a difference.
I do too, to be honest. And even as I was one of the folks calling for a receiver or whatever you want to call it, taking out of the hands of the administration, which to their credit, they didn't create this mess. I don't think they made it much better. My thing has been, it is not working for anyone there, or the people who work there, the corrections officers, certainly not the detainees who are dying at high rates. We got to try something new. And so I'm hoping that this is the thing that will get us where we need to go, which is a place that people can feel safe in.
So one of the things that the mayor argued about when he talked about this was the fact that when the city council passed the bill to close Rikers in 2027, it also prevented people of the city from spending capital dollars to fix the actual plant. Has that been a deterrent to making things better? And will that be that affect any federal takeover in terms of trying to fix what's going on?
Well, I support in making sure that while it is open, it is functional. So you want to make sure it's functional, you want to make sure locks are working, things of that nature, and I think there should be some funds for that. I don't think that's what happened here. And what we've seen with this administration, and even the judge said over and over, there was a lack of transparency on so many things that we think could have caused this to be a safer place. I'm hoping now that we're in the situation we're in, which a lot of us asked for, this will be better. I would have loved to see a plan from this administration that can make people feel confident that you can go in there as a detainee or for work and come home the same way. But that never happened. And so my hope is that we have a responsible person, but also that it's not just one person. I think you have to have a lot of different voices that are in the room helping the person make the right decision, so that people who have lived experience, people who work there, people who understand can be a part of that conversation.
But is it the violence? Is it that the physical plant is deteriorating and is depressing? Is it the lack of programs for people who are in there? Where would you point the finger?
Well, I think it's all and. Definitely one of the biggest symptoms that we know of is the violence. And we have seen a high rate of people literally dying who are in the custody. We've seen people getting hurt, detainees and corrections officers, frankly. We've seen a lot of sexual assaults, detainees and corrections officers as well. So I think there's also a culture there, and that's one of the things we want to make sure doesn't happen. You don't get the culture into the new borough-based jails.
So how do you change the culture if people going in are violent?
Well, one, we want to remember that 80% or more of the folks who are there haven't been convicted of a crime, so they're waiting for their trial.
Right.
And I think one of the things that everybody agrees on, everyone on all sides of this, is speedy trial is a problem. And so I really wish we all can just get in a room and figure out how to get people tried, either send them home or send them upstate. But being in Rikers is a huge problem. We also agree, right now there's about 188 people there who have mental health issues, severe mental health issues, that shouldn't be there. And so we should all be focusing on, let's get medical help for people who have a medical problem. But that's not where we are right now. And so what we need to do is have an administration that wants to follow the law, close Rikers, have conversations about how we can reframe the culture so that that culture that's in Rikers doesn't come to the boroughs. And I will say one of the problems is where it's situated, out of sight, out of mind. And so many things could be going on. And the way it has been for decades, because oftentimes people don't need to think about what's happening on Rikers Island because they're not there. It's far away. They're not working there. They're not detained there. And sometimes it's not on top of our mind.
So, you mentioned the fact that it's supposed to close in 2027, but nobody believes it can close in 2027 because the community jails are way behind in terms of building them. So does the city council have to change that? And what is the reasonable thing to do in terms of when you move from Rikers to the community jails?
Yeah, one of the problems I have is not that we're not reaching the deadline. The problem is it doesn't seem we had an administration that even wanted to try. And so when you have a plan, when you make a deadline, we know that sometimes it doesn't get achieved. But when you have an administration that seems to try to block it every which way, then it's disingenuous to say that it's running late when part of the reason it's running late is because you're not believing in it. And so I think everyone agrees now that it's not going to close on time. But we want to make sure we hold a deadline and hold people to that deadline so that whatever happens if it doesn't reach that deadline, we know we at least tried. We gave it a good faith effort. I don't think that good faith effort has happened in this administration, because I just don't think they believed in it and didn't really believe to try to follow the law.
So what do you think of the mayor's idea that he turns one of the community jails, I think he's talking about the one in Manhattan, into a place where you would put people who have mental health issues?
I think, one, it's good to have a conversation about where you house people who have severe mental health issues. I don't know if it has to be one of the places that he mentioned. It does have to be somewhere. And so, you know, we've put out 2 plans around mental health, and we're going to update it in the near future. And we have continually pointed out that we don't have the infrastructure. So it's not just the physical infrastructure, it's also the funding to make sure that people get a continuum of care. And very often you hear now involuntary hospitalization, and they make it seem as if it's people against it, people for it. When people would be surprised to know that we had 8,000 New Yorkers who were involuntarily hospitalized just last year alone. And so the question is not whether you're involuntarily hospitalizing, it's who's making the decision and what happens after the continuum of care. So where we have agreement is that continuum of care is not being provided, and we have to find space for it. But what I don't want is someone who has been clear they don't believe in this law, they don't want to do it, try to find a reason to prevent it from happening.
Well, part of the reason that they're concerned about it is that apparently it's too small. The community jails are too small. They only will hold approximately 4,200 people. There are, as you know yourself, because you went there just recently, there's 7,000 people on Rikers Island. What do you do with the rest of them?
So what we do know, and you look at the data, the amount of people who are in jail doesn't necessarily how safe we actually are. And so I want to make sure that we are having accountability for people who are doing crimes, who are doing things that are making us unsafe. I also want to make sure that we're preventing that from happening. Sometimes we confuse that conversation as well. We do know that a lot of folks who are on Rikers don't necessarily have to be on Rikers. And there are ways that we can get them off the island while keeping us safe, while holding them accountable and making sure they get
Where do you
trial.
put them?
Well, you have people who are on supervised release that can go a long way. You do have people who are on monitored release as well, who are monitored some way, one way or the other. The other thing is getting the folks who are mentally, who actually are mentally not well, into care. The last part is where we started with. Let's get them to trial. A lot of folks are there waiting on trial, and what we've seen, and this is in the data, the longer that you wait there, the people who commit the most of the crime are actually there for long time periods. And so if we can shorten that time when people are on Rikers, we might be able to do a lot to lessen some of the violence that's happening there. It's been a stain on our city for a very long time, and I want to be honest about that. This administration didn't create it, but we do remember when there was like 19,000 people in Rikers, and there was a lot of violence in the streets. And I think sometimes people want a quick answer. There isn't, but there are answers. And just saying, you know, people may not know that the amount of people on Rikers is actually going up. People may think there's less people on there. And again, just the amount of people who are in any kind of jail doesn't necessitate that there is safety. But we do want to make sure there's accountability. We want to make sure people are held accountable. We also want to prevent the type of violence that we're seeing in the streets, and that's not always the same thing.
You know, we only have about a minute left, but I want to ask you about the gang database. You want to see it eliminated. The NYPD is bragging about the fact that it helped them find the members of the Venezuelan street gang who attacked cops recently. Your thoughts about that? Yeah,
that was a very bad incident, and so we want to make sure folks are held accountable for that and prevent it. What we want to do is good police work, and I believe it's good police work that help find people who commit or accused of committing crimes like that. But the gang database, what has happened oftentimes is people are on it, they have no idea they're on it, and then they don't know how to figure out. So you think people
should be notified that they're on it?
I'm not sure that the gang database, like the one the city has, like the one the state has, that's actually feeding information into the federal government, feeding information into ICE, is actually keeping us safer. I think there's good police work that we've done before the gang database that actually found people who were parts of street crime and street crews. And we should use that, that methodology as well. What we've seen is this is a way to get people in a system that has long layered effects. Even people who simply responded to something on Facebook or on Twitter and may get wrapped up in something that has nothing to do with a gang at all, and it's been harmful. We've just seen these communities time and time again be harmed in the name of safety, and we still have the issues on the street.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there. Well, you're back with Public Advocate Jumaane Williams. You know, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the fact that you do have a primary this year, and you're running against Queens Assemblywoman Jennifer Rajkumar, who has been putting out some memes that were a little bit derogatory. I wonder how you feel about that.
You know, I've had a lot of races. I have to say this one is probably the most distasteful one I've been a part of. That seems to be the trend of some folks, from the president to the mayor, and now one of his biggest allies. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that that's the tack she wants to take. I'm always into what are the policy differences? What are the things that we can do to make the city better? So that's what we're going to focus on. We're very proud of the work that we've done in the city council. In the public advocate's office. Partner with the city council, we passed more pieces of legislation than all the public advocates combined. We have other cities that have reached out to us, saw the work that we've done around affordability, around public safety, and want to try to implement that in their own city. So we've testified in city councils in other cities. So we're very proud of that, and we have a great record to work on, and we're going to let folks know. One thing primaries are good for, it allows you to talk about your record. It allows you to talk about what you've done. Sometimes people may not know. And so that's the positive of this.
But you have an ad that's basically talking about the fact that your role should be to stand up for New York, but also stand up against other people. Tell me about that and why you think that's the message you should be using.
You know, as the public advocate, as the watchdog, as the ombudsman for the city, your job is not to be friend or foe to any one person. It's to really make sure that the city's moving in the right way. And part of that job is actually being a check on the executive, on government in general. And what we've seen in the past is that we need that now more than ever. And it's been a painful situation for me, what's happening, you know, even with the mayor. But my job is to make sure I call that out. My job is to make sure we're moving in the right direction. And I don't know that folks know what's going to happen next, but they are concerned.
Nobody knows.
And so if you never needed a time for an independent public advocate, one who had the experience lifting up things and actually getting things done, now's that time. And so we're very proud to have that conversation.
So you often start speaking with the same phrase, peace and blessings, love and light. Why did you start doing that, and why? You
know, this is a hectic world that we're in. I am a person of faith as well, a person of, you know, positive energy. So when I start, I really want to get that out. I want to wish everyone who can hear me peace and blessings in their life. I want to send love and light out to the world, even in some tough times. You know, there's a saying that I think about now that I actually heard from RuPaul. I'm not a big RuPaul fan, but I happened to see it on Instagram, and I listened. And he said, it's okay to look at the darkness, just don't stare at it. And that was something I needed at that moment in time. So whatever I'm doing, I'm trying my best to move in as much love as possible. And that's difficult in the way this system is set up. But if you can start speaking it, you know, you can hopefully start.
You know, there's been a rise in anti-Semitism in the city. I wonder why you think that is and what can be done about it.
You know, it is painful to see just a rise in hate crime in general.
There has been.
Absolutely a rise in anti-Semitism. And I think there are people who unfortunately are feeding into that, and we have to have people that will take a step back and say, we have to fight against anti-Semitism, we have to fight against just anti-hate in general. We also know that we have law enforcement partners. We also have seen from experience that that alone doesn't stop it. Really getting folks educated, getting communities to feel empowered, getting communities talking to each other, are things that can really help, as well as the accountability. But you also see people that use other folks' trauma to benefit themselves. And so I've seen that in the Jewish community, I've seen that in the Black community, where folks are really good at using the trauma to elevate themselves as a person who's going to stop those things from happening, and that's harmless in the past.
So when did you first get involved or get interested in public service?
My first love is acting. And so first love, I have Tourette's syndrome, and when I'm acting, the tics go away. It's a very zen place for me. I do some work now with an organization called Theater of War. And that was my first love, but social justice issues were really big for me. My heroes were X-Men, Spider-Man, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. They were kind of just folks that were lifting up the people whose voices weren't being heard. And so I thought I was going to go in the acting direction. I actually started doing film production in college. And then I got involved at Brooklyn College campus, the student government there. And it really started seeing
was the catalyst.
How that impacted. And so I'm a community organizer by training. I have to tell you, it was long before Barack Obama. No one had any idea what that was. My mother asked me, please get a real job. I had to tell her that it was a real job. And then I happened to run against a city council member about 15, 20 years ago. People thought I was crazy for even trying to do that. 6 folks in the race. So I'm doing it anyway. The Most High worked it out, and I've been trying to cause as much trouble as possible on behalf of communities who I feel have been ignored for a long time.
So if you weren't in politics, what would you be doing?
Hopefully, I will be an actor, and I would be able to feed my family doing the work on the stage and on film. It's something I still love. It's very dear to me, you know, it's a skill set, thankfully, that helps during times like this when you're speaking to people and trying to make sure you can try to command a stage. But it's a real big part of me. My therapist has said make sure I don't let go of it.
So basically you're a ham?
I'm not a ham, definitely not a ham. But my therapist has said to make sure that I don't let go of it. And so I've also been in therapy for about 8, 9 years, which is one of the best things I've ever done. So I really talk about mental health and make sure people get that. But I'm going to listen to him. And so I try to find whatever way I can just to be a part of that story is really important to me.
So I read that you at one time opened a vegetarian restaurant. Tell me about it. Why did you do it? Where was it?
You know, it's interesting.
Are you a vegetarian?
I didn't know this word back then, but I'm pescatarian.
Pescatarian.
So I eat fish with scales. There's a deeper meaning behind that. But fish with scales I eat. But at the time, it was around the time I purchased a home and I decided to open a cafe. And it was right ahead of the curve, right before this was the thing. And it didn't work out. Like a lot of folks who go into the restaurant business, didn't quite work out. But it was a great experience. I learned how folks navigate New York City in particular doing business.
So we asked New Yorkers about college and whether college is a good investment or whether we should be looking more towards teaching people trades. I wonder your take on that.
You know, I try to use conversations that include the word and not or. I think and would be such a more helpful way to think about things. And I do agree that college is still a very good investment. I would encourage people to do it. I think the cost of college is way too high, and we need to find ways to bring that down. But there are some folks that are not going to do college, and that's fine. And finding a trade is a very lucrative business at times, and you can feed your family. So we should do that as well. I think we need to have options for everyone, particularly as our society is changing, even how we think of these things. So
you've chosen to raise your family here. Why do you think New York City is a great place to have a family and raise a family? I'm
born and bred in New York City. You know, I'm from Brooklyn, but I'm citywide, so every borough is equal. And we'll have that conversation after I'm no longer citywide. But my parents came from the small island of Grenada. They went to school in Washington, D.C., Howard University. They moved up here. This is an amazing place. The energy that is in this city, you know, again, my 2 loves and passions, acting and politics, just the experience I got at Brooklyn College, City University of New York, really prepared me for politics. I don't know that you have another place that has so much energy, so many different spaces, so many different people and cultures. You can get genuine food from almost anywhere in the world right now. What's missing is the affordability for so many New Yorkers. Yeah. That's the primary reason that they're leaving. And it you know, impacts my family as well. But this is someplace we want to make sure we stay. We want to raise kids here, which is what we're doing. But we want to make sure we make it affordable so that the hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers who have to leave here because they can't afford it don't have to anymore.
So play tour guide. If you could take people to 3 places you think are must-see places in New York, what would be the 3 places?
Wow, I wasn't prepared for that. The 3 places. Because of my theater chops, I got to go to Broadway. So we got to go see a Broadway show. I have a disease called Nick Fandom. So I probably got to
It's an incurable disease.
It is an incurable disease. We probably go to MSG. And just because of, I might pass by the Schaumburg. Okay. But I got to throw in some Caribbean food in Flatbush. Okay. So that's probably 4, but I got to get some Caribbean, some real Grenadian food in Flatbush.
I'm with you. And thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
And thank you at home for joining me as well.